This is the Ask Faleskini podcast, where the modern economy is discussed from a skeptic's perspective. Mr. Faleskini helps you distinguish what is sustainable in our economy and what isn't. Not everything that glitters is gold, and not all mud is dirty. The podcaster Mr. Faleskini provides no-nonsense advice. He had it all, lost it all, went bankrupt multiple times, and is now attempting to come back from zero with sustainable growth. There are numerous coaches and preachers on the internet that preach about positive thinking and how life is all roses if you just care to see it that way. Well, Mr. Faleskini is definitely not one of them. We recommend you ask Faleskini to keep it real. He discusses the darker side of the current economic reality, the side that's more important for your personal and business finance. His first intention is to help you keep what you already have. Not to be a complete party pooper, Mr. Faleskini will also hint at the earning opportunities in the economy today. In order to please the almighty algorithm, please like, share, and subscribe. And now it's time to start taking notes. The mic goes to the podcaster, the one and only Mr. Faleskini.
Welcome to the Ask Faleskini podcast with a guest. I'm proud to present Jennifer McCormack from Australia. Jennifer is a kinesiologist, neuro-linguistic programming practitioner, neuro-reprocessing therapist, clinical hypnotherapist, and strategic psychotherapist. Jennifer is helping entrepreneurial women end their suffering and self-doubt and propel them into alignment with their dream. Helping women break free from the restraints that hold them back. That is what she does best. She creates unwavering alignment, built an unshakable foundation, and scaled to heights that you have only dreamed of. It is time now to make this your current reality. That is why we have Jennifer on our podcast today. Jennifer, please tell us more about yourself.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks for having me on. Yes, so I work with, as you mentioned, entrepreneurial women. And I help them scale their business. And we help them scale their business not necessarily through strategy, but through energetic and mindset alignment. They're not too sure on how to move forward, whether they can do what they want to do. So we help really take away all that self-doubt and put them into, that unwavering alignment with what they really want to desire. So part of it needs to be, first of all, in what is your next step? What do you want to achieve at first and foremost? Is it one more client? Is it $1,000 more? Or, what is the next step to getting you on the path to where you want to go? Because sometimes when we want to jump to, say, $10,000 months, for our nervous system, that is too much to get behind. So it's like, all right, what is the next step that we can work with to help you get on track with where you want to go?
Okay, you point out that strategy might not be the most important. Did I understand correctly that alignment with your goals is much more important than the strategy itself? And if I understood correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're not fully aligned with your goals, what you want to achieve, no amount of strategizing will help you reach your goals.
Well, strategy is important, Peter. But as you said, if you have the best strategy in the world, but don't believe that this strategy is going to work for you or don't believe that you can do it, it's the energy behind how we execute the strategy. So whether you come onto a podcast or whether someone goes on to, an Instagram live or creates a perfectly curated copy for their post, unless they're energetically getting behind it, unless they believe that they can do it, you're going to feel as the recipient of that content, you're going to feel something's a little bit off, right? You're going to feel that they're not fully there. Their energy is not behind it. They're not fully believing in themselves. And you're not going to become the authority figure in your field for people then to trust you to help them along the way. So while strategy is important to some degree, what we find is when we start working on the mindset and the confidence behind it all, it's even if you currently don't have the strategy, the aha moments come in when you're mentally behind it, you come across and you look at content out there very differently. It's like I had a client the other day and she's like, I saw someone say this about content, and then in the next 10 minutes I saw exactly the same thing from a different person. And it's like, I've never heard that before, but I've seen these two people so much over the past 5 years. But it's just in that moment, she was so behind her messaging and what she wanted to put out there. She heard these two things simultaneously, took action on it, and got the results from it. And it's like, well, hang on, that's been out there before. Why now?
Okay. Really important question. A lot of people right now are using ChatGPT to help them with their content. And what you're saying is that the content is not so important as the energy behind it.
100%.
So could we, or would you say that ChatGPT can help you, but only if you're aligned with what ChatGPT writes, and if you're ready for this next step that, or whatever fruit this will bring, your work will bring, if you're using ChatGPT? How do you see the ChatGPT? Myself as an AI expert, I see it just as a recycling of everything that is already on the internet. So basically, you're recycling content. Even if ChatGPT is creating content, you're basically recycling it. So should we encourage the use of the recycled content and energy alignment, or should we encourage new content creation? What is more important? How do you look at these things?
I think both has its place. And I think first and foremost is, are you using ChatGPT out of scarcity? Are you doing it because you don't think you're good enough to create the content, or are you doing it to assist you in creating good content? So it all depends on the intention behind what we do. See, ChatGPT can give you the most perfect copy, the technically curated, amazing languaging. But if you don't believe it, it's not going to work for you, right? So the other thing with ChatGPT, which I find doesn't work for a lot of people, it doesn't have your personality behind it. So ChatGPT sometimes can be quite dry in its languaging, and it's like the little nuances that you say, the little sentences and the little words that could only come from you and that help you connect with your community, ChatGPT doesn't necessarily add them in.
Would you agree with the statement that ChatGPT might be perfect, but it's not authentic?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that feels right.
Okay. I have another question. You specialize in female entrepreneurs.
Yes.
And you're one of the biggest experts in the world, probably regarding the neuroscience right now. And you are a neuro-linguistic programming practitioner, and you also practice reprocessing therapy.
Yes.
What's your take? Is there a difference, or is there considerable difference between male and female neurology? Are we wired differently? That is to simplify.
Absolutely we are. We're wired differently for many reasons. Obviously, our physiology is different, but also the way that we're treated as children are very different. And you can see this very much so when you interact with both girls and boys at quite a young age, where generally, and I'm just calling generally speaking because there's always exceptions to the rule, generally boys are encouraged to take more risks. Generally, boys are told to get on with things, to not sit in their emotional state for too long. Where when girls do, it's almost encouraged, right? It was interesting. I was listening to my son. My son is 10 years old. I've got two boys. So I really see the difference with watching my boys grow up and how boys and girls are treated very differently from a very young age. And what's something interesting that my son came home and he said, and they have the little sing songs they come home with from school, and he was singing this song, and it went don't quote me exactly, but it went something like that when I'm in the playground, I need to be chosen by a girl. And I looked at him and I went, where did you get that from? And he said, oh, a girl was singing it at school. And I'm like, isn't that interesting? Because this is what we find a lot with female entrepreneurs, especially when it comes to relationship, is girls wait to be chosen. Where generally boys choose. So there's a lot about how boys and girls are treated differently on the upbringing. So then when we come to building a business, there is no doubt that the female energy is a lot more empathetic and a lot more emotional. So when it comes to in business, we lean a lot more into how we feel, right? How we feel about ourselves, how we feel about ourselves compared to other people. And this plays a very big role in how we see ourselves in business and how we think we can scale our business. Where boys and men are generally sit less in their emotion and more in their logic. So they're more likely to action things quicker and be more reactive when things go wrong, because they're not making the decisions from the emotional state as much as women do.
Okay, when you're talking about emotions, could we extrapolate that and say that female entrepreneurs also rely much more on intuition than male entrepreneurs?
They're learning to. So what I mean by that is a lot of female entrepreneurs still come from a generalized corporate environment. And a corporate environment traditionally has taught even women to be more strategic and masculine in past. So leaning into their intuition as they become entrepreneurs can be quite new for a lot of women. It's definitely a lot easier for them to lean into their intuitive side than men, because intuition as it naturally energy is a feminine energy. Now, we both as men and women have masculine and feminine energy, but it is easier for women to lean into that feminine energy, therefore their intuition, therefore their creative side. Because the creative side of us does come from our intuition.
Okay. Another question that is also popular in the mainstream media, let's say, is body cognition. How important is for females to be fit in good physical shape in order to be good entrepreneurs?
Look, and it depends what you call good physical shape. I believe that part of being the best that you can be, to deliver the best that you can be, and to reach your dreams and goals, is to nurture the mind, body, and soul. So there is part of that is about health and fitness. Do we have to be elite athletes? Absolutely not. But I believe we need to take care of our bodies and nurture our bodies in the best way we can to get the most out of it. Because when we look at our bodies, when we look at our mind, when we look at our spirit, it's all interconnected. So can we be on top of our game mentally if we're not on top of our game physically? And the answer underneath that is no. Right? If we have a high sugar intake, well, that's going to affect how the gut works. And we know that there is so much information out there these days that connects the health of the gut to the way our brain works, the health of the gut to the level of anxiety that we have. So if we don't look after ourselves physically, nutritionally, exercise, movement-wise, yes, we are not going to be the best we can be if we're looking at peak performance-wise.
So it is important. So body cognition is real.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You mentioned the holy trinity of work-life balance and healthy life, mind, body, and soul. We already touched the body. Let's work on a soul. That is, I think, the most underappreciated part of our, let's say, entrepreneurial journey. How can we work on our soul? What should we do? How should we put time aside to work on our soul? What's your advice on that?
I think the easiest way, Peter, is through meditation. And why I like meditation so much, and especially for even beginner meditators, is that we can do guided meditations and we don't have to sit there and try and blank out our minds. But our intuition, our spirit, talks to us on such a gentle vibration. So if we think about you and I talking to each other, it's quite a dense vibration, hence that we can hear each other in the physical and other people can hear us. But the lighter the frequency is, the more quiet we have to be able to listen to it. So that is our intuition. So I like to look at it like this. We have our intuition, which is a very light vibration. And to connect with that, we can do that through quietening out our external noise. So whether that's, I always say, when you create a space of boredom, that is when your intuition becomes the loudest, because your intuition and your soul doesn't change how loud it is, but when you change how loud the external noise is, then your intuition can be heard. So through meditation, it's almost like stripping back the layers of who you think you are, the man, the woman, the person, the father, the mother, the entrepreneur, and just coming back to that infinite point where it's almost like I am this nothingness, but sit in this all-encompassing space.
You went really deep in that. I have another question for beginners. A lot of busy people just forget about their soul. And there's so much videos and everything on YouTube regarding how to, let's say, pay more attention to your soul. You mentioned meditation is the best practice to get in touch with your soul. Would you recommend for beginners that they go on the group meditation, or should they try in the privacy of their own home? Should they listen to all the online meditations that are guided meditations that are available? How should they go about it? How should they start with this process? Because the easiest is if your family kind of guides you into it and then that you start practicing it from a small age. However, if you don't have this experience, how should someone that is like 40 years old start meditating and not feeling stupid in the process? And
Great idea. There's two things here. One, there's no one-size-fits-all method, right? Mm-hmm. And part of this is to really understand yourself and how you operate. When I first started meditating, I couldn't sit down for 5 minutes to meditate. My mind would go absolutely everywhere. So what I learned to do is two things. I actually started in a group setting. I didn't really love it. Some people love group settings. So try a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and give yourself grace in the learning process. It's like, I need to find what suits me. But as a overthinker that I used to be, what I found the easiest method for me, and try this out, is I do a brain dump before I journal, before I meditate. So it's grabbing a piece of paper, sit down even 10 to 20 minutes, and just everything in the mind, get it on paper. It doesn't have to make sense. It doesn't have to be structurally perfect. It's just downloading everything that's in the mind, how I'm thinking today, what I thought about, any to-do list, just like everything in here, get it out. Because when you are going to start to meditate and create this space of silence, all that's going to come to the surface anyway. So if you spend 10 minutes just to literally get it out on paper first, it's already out before you start meditating. So that's a little trick for an ex-overthinker that's really, really helped me just help clear my mind a little bit more and know that it's not an overnight journey to the perfect meditation. And really, there is no such thing as a perfect meditation. Well, some meditations will last 5 minutes, some will last an hour, and everything in between and more. I remember going to a Buddhist monastery in China one year to visit my father that was there. And there was this nun in her room, and her goal at that time was to meditate for 24 hours. Now, if you've ever been in the Buddhist philosophy, they really look at clearing the mind of everything. So sitting in a space of nothingness. Now, as a beginner meditator, if you were to do that, you would feel like a failure because that is extremely hard to do, especially at the very beginning. This is why I do love guided meditations, because it's other people taking you on a journey that all you have to do is follow. And when your mind wanders, that's okay. You just bring it back to the voice that you're hearing. And know that your mind will keep wandering all the time. And the more you bring it back and the more you bring it back and the more you bring it back, you start to stay on track even more. Until maybe 30 days later, you're like, oh, I'm not wandering as much anymore. But it's really about giving yourself that space and grace to not be perfect from the beginning, to be messy, and to try different things until something you're like, oh, I really like that meditation. I really like just listening to someone counting my breaths, or I like listening to a beat where I can breathe to, or I like this person, how she takes me on an adventure into my mind. There is going to be something that works for you. So try different things until it happens. Some days I just really like listening to beautiful music. And that takes me into a different world, and that's my meditation. So there's no one size fits all.
Really good insight. Let's move to the mind. What should we do as a business people to work on our mind? How important is that we challenge our patterns or thinking patterns? How important is to learn something new, and how should we go about it?
Challenging the mind comes with, first, creating a space of self-observation. Because if we don't know what we're doing, if we don't know what we're thinking, then we've got nothing to challenge. So for a beginner, I have 2 tasks. One, on a consistent basis, hopefully every night or every evening, ask yourself how you're feeling and how your day went. Now, what this does, that helps increase that self-awareness, even for that last 24-hour period. And as you do that on a regular basis, your self-awareness improves so much, whether now I have a self-awareness at a level that I know what I'm doing in the moment. And I'm like, oh, isn't that interesting? I can see that belief come up, and that doesn't work for me. Right? So, but the first stage to that is capture yourself every 24 hours. Mm-hmm. What was I doing? Did it work for me? How did I feel today? Right? There's a couple of other things here which is really important, Peter. One, we have to have the understanding that maybe everything doesn't work for me. Maybe the way that I'm thinking isn't 100% truth. And it's being able to challenge yourself into saying maybe there's a different way. Maybe there's a different thought pattern. And the way
Can
that
I
we
interfere here?
Yes.
Challenging oneself is, according to my experience, possible when you're really high in your mind developing journey. In the beginning, I would dare to say that you need a coach or a mentor that will challenge you. Would you agree that in the beginning, if you have not worked on your mind in the past, that the mentor or the coach is the best or the most important thing that you can that can challenge your mind and that can start your mind developing journey or kickstart your mind developing journey, if we may say so?
It can be, but it doesn't have to be. Mm-hmm. I think if you have some simple simple questions to ask yourself, you can start navigating through this yourself. And simple questions can be, am I happy? Where's the resistance in my life? Do I have the life that I want? Because if you don't have the life that you want, if you don't have the income that you want, if you don't have the business growth that you want, there is something in your inner world that isn't in alignment with the trajectory that you're going. Now, this is where you might need a coach to help you find the little nuances that isn't working. But even just going, okay, I don't have clearly the life that I 100% want. I'm not like, this thing over here frustrates me. This thing over here makes me angry. This thing over here triggers me. There is something from the external world that is triggering a belief internally, and that's what's showing up in my reality. If you're being triggered by the external, that is your mind telling you that you're holding a belief that doesn't work for you. Hence, it's being triggered.
Okay. How important is appreciation and gratitude on mind developing journey?
It's really important. Because why is it important? When we're in a state of gratitude, we can't be in any other state. And gratitude comes in with acceptance. So if there is a trauma, if there is something that you can't control, and this is the biggest thing with personal development, is you can change what you can control, but you can't change what you can't control, obviously. But when it comes to interacting with people, and if you're faced with someone in your life that does not treat you well, doesn't support you, doesn't encourage you, puts you down, you actually can't control what they do. So this is where acceptance really needs to come in, right? So acceptance for what you can't control, but then obviously have healthy boundaries. But when it comes to gratitude, the gratitude can come in to help with the acceptance, right? And the gratitude doesn't have to be, I'm grateful for the sun that's shining today. I'm grateful for being alive. I mean, they're quite surface level of gratitude. But when you can be grateful for the lessons that have been put in your way, when you can be grateful for, the hurdles that are here because they're teaching you something and helping you grow, that's when you take gratitude to a new level. And that's part of that is acceptance.
How important is to practice gratitude regularly?
I think it's important, but I think a lot of it's done the wrong way, to be honest with you, Peter. I think when a lot of people do gratitude, it is a lot of the surface level stuff. It's, I'm grateful for that I'm breathing today. I'm grateful that I've got money consistently coming in. I'm grateful that I've got a job. Like, yeah, that's great, but the fight that you had with your partner this morning, how can you be grateful for that? When shit hits the fan, how can you be grateful for that? When, I was listening to a coach once tell a story about doing a workshop, facilitating a workshop. And he was facilitating a workshop of women. And there's one woman in particular that was sitting in on this workshop, and she'd been sexually assaulted. And she said to the facilitator, I don't understand how I can have gratitude for my experience. And it didn't take her long to see it. And while the situation is not a situation that anyone wants to be in, the situation led her to that space and time where she was connecting with people that wanted to heal, that she was connecting with people that understood her. She was connecting with people that were willing to help her become a better person. And if there was one thing she got out of her circumstances, that was the ability to see growth in herself beyond her past trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when deep gratitude comes into play.
Would you agree with my experiences or my conclusions when I coach different business people how to improve their business? There's always a past trauma that is holding them back. So when they start working on their past trauma, and when they, you said, when they become grateful for it, only then the growth can continue or even begin in some cases. Would you agree with that?
I think it's very important. Yes, for me, working with a lot of women, I see a lot of it is about being heard, being seen, and being supported. And there's somewhere along their childhood journey that they didn't feel that. But when they can see that them not being heard gave them a bigger voice, when they didn't feel supported, it gave them the courage to back themselves. Yes, that's when the growth really starts.
Really good. And now I have a question from your webpage. I saw that, and it's really something that I aspire to. So you're a therapist, you know all these methods, and you have years of experiences. But on your webpage, you're talking about wellness. Is that because of the alignment? Because people are going towards a better place? Is that why you call it wellness and not therapy? How would you distinguish between wellness and therapy?
This is my personal take on this, Peter. When I look at therapy, I work with a lot of women that have been 10, 12, 14 years in therapy, talking about the same thing over and over and over and over again. So it was important for me not to necessarily use that term because I'm not like that. One, when you work with me, I work holistically. Two, I don't need to know your full story, backstory, to help you heal it. It's, for me, I'm very much what you might call a forward-facing therapist. Mm-hmm. So I want to know what you aspire to. I want to know what your health and wellness goals are. I want to know what your business goals are. And then the only time that we need to look back is when there's something from the past that's interfering with your future. I don't believe that we need to create a list of what's happened in our past and tick all of that off as we've healed this, we've healed this, we've healed that. So the therapeutic model that is very much worldwide known, I believe does not work. And that's why I don't call myself a therapist.
I really like this forward-facing concept. Would you agree that some let's say, problems or traumas have already healed, so you don't need to go back there? Some people have processed trauma the right way. It's not that every trauma was processed the wrong way. Is that also a possibility? Or
yes, absolutely. If you know how to process your trauma, absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. I remember years ago, what are we now? So 6 years ago now, I went through a very traumatic period in my life where I lost my child at 20 weeks pregnancy. And this was extremely traumatic for me at the time. And I remember someone coming to me and saying, go back to work. You just need to take your mind off it. And I looked at them and I went, no. I'm going to process this as I'm going through it. And that is so important to learn to do, because time does not heal. Time suppresses and pushes it aside, where you're just going to have to look at it again later. So when we learn to feel into the emotions that are arising, when we learn to finish the emotional cycle, that's where the healing is. And I remember talking to my dad probably about 8 days post-loss. And I said to him, I've done enough crying. And my dad is an ex-therapist, and he kind of had this little giggle. And he goes, what's next? And I went, oh, I have a choice here. What do I want to do next? And it was like I did like 8 days of full tears. And I'm like, that's what I needed to process that emotion. So I wasn't going to distract it by going back to work or doing this or getting on with life. It's like, yeah, I'm learning to really process my experience in the moment. And I will sit with that emotion until there is nothing left and the cycle is finished. And then I'll know it's time to move forward to the next and the next and the next until I feel like I've fully processed everything and I'm balanced back again.
Okay, let's try to put that in a business perspective. So in business is similar. We have some past trauma that we did not process correctly, or we just put aside and said the time will heal it, even if we know that that's not the case. So can we conclude that if business people would like to go to the next level, they need to take time to process everything? Even a shock in business, like, I don't know, you lose a company or you lose a big business or there's something else. Is there something that you have to process and not just put aside? And you have to have all the feelings, and it's important that you somehow have this emotional intelligence and understand that you have to feel all these emotions, even if they seem negative at the first glance, in order to heal and to be able to move on. And also, if possible, as you hinted, you have to process it in a way that you can express gratitude for it, even if it seems really negative at the first glance.
Look, with the gratitude bit, it might take you a few years to be able to look back with a clear lens and go, oh, I can now see why that happened. When it comes to business, this is a very intricate thing. So what we do know is between the age of 0 and 7 years old is where most of our beliefs, our values, our behaviors are all set in place, right? And then as we go from there, what ends up happening is that those beliefs get triggered along the way. So when we look at business, and let's go, for example, we lose a client, right? We lose a big client. We feel that loss. The question I ask, is this really about the client? Or is this actually what is happening? The losing the client is triggering some past trauma, some past beliefs that we haven't dealt with before. And this is what I normally find is the case, whether when people are losing clients or have dropped in income, what it's actually triggering within them is an abandonment issue. So is it about what's happened right there in the moment? Most of the time it's not. But we go, okay, this is triggering within you this abandonment wound. Let's go process that. Now, here's the other thing that I wanted to add to it, which is just a little nuance that you mentioned, is the feel it to heal it. While this is, I feel, is important in the moment when we learn that emotional intelligence, I think it's really important as a coach and a therapist that this is not the only model that works and sometimes can be extremely dangerous in going back then. It's really interesting when working with a lot of heavy old trauma that we don't take patients back and go, that thing that happened to you 15 years ago, let's embody that emotion again so we can finish the cycle. It's already done and dusted. It's old. We don't need to do that. And this is why along the way I have brought other therapy under my belt. And when I say forward-facing therapy, so they don't have to relive that trauma again. right? That's the last thing we want, especially when it's heavy trauma. So it's like, how can we then heal that aspect of self so we can move on without the core wound?
Okay, you shared so many nice or useful advices and really useful experiences that I'm sure our listeners can profit. Is there anything else, any quick tips or trade secrets that you can share with our listeners to end this interview so that they could profit immensely just by doing this one thing?
Okay, well, one thing. So many little gold nuggets. The biggest thing that I do when I work on helping entrepreneurs build their business, it's not just about mindset. Mindset is only one of 5 aspects to it. Like we spoke about before with nutrition, with our mind, our body, and our soul, there is more to it than just what goes on cognitively. So I actually have an ebook called From Slow to Overflow that goes through these 5 pillars that I use in my work with all my clients. And as I said, mindset's just one of them. So when we start really looking into, okay, what can I start to see in my mindset that I know instantly that I need to change? All right, let's start working on that. Nutritionally, what do I know instantly I need to change? And sometimes for a lot of people, I'm drinking too much coffee. It's giving me anxiety. All right, let's shift that. So when we start looking at all these 5 pillars, yeah, I really should be doing this. I really should be doing that. I really need to do that for myself. I know that I need to get more sleep in. And that's going to help me function more optimal level for myself. So there's a lot of surface stuff that we can already do to help ourselves to get on that trajectory. But here's the one thing that I tell every single client. Know where you're going, but also be honest with yourself on where you are. Like, where are you right now in business? How do you think about yourself compared to other people? And where do you want to go? But most importantly, what's the next step? Because I have a lot of women tell me they want the $1 million business. While that is achievable and that's absolutely great and we can get you there, reality is if you're only earning $5,000 a month, your next step is not the $1 million mark.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the next step for you? Because that step is what your nervous system and your mind can get behind so much more successfully than going, I'm going to do the jump to the $1 million.
Thank you very much for all these insights. Where can our listeners and our viewers find you?
You can find me, I'm mainly on Instagram, so Jennifer McCormack Wellness, and via my website at jennifermccormack.com.au.
I will include both links in the description below. Jennifer, thank you for being my guest tonight.
You're so welcome, Peter. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, Mr. Faleskini, for this outstanding podcast. And thank you for listening to the Ask Faleskini podcast until the end. Mr. Faleskini would love to hear your feedback in the comments. And don't forget, if you want to know, ask Faleskini or listen to the Ask Faleskini podcast. In order to please the almighty algorithm, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.